Hi, everyone. It is Friday, and this is the Parent Exchange. And my name is Tilly Elvram, and I am one of the admins here in the group, Parent Support for Online Learning. And today we have a very special guest, a fellow parent advocate. And we're kind of continuing a theme this week. We've dubbed it Texas Week. Because we've had two amazing advocates from Texas with us to talk about education and school choice and online learning and how we're all coping during COVID-19 and how that's affecting our families and our kids' education. So I'd like to introduce to you today Inga Cotton. She is the founder and executive director with San Antonio Charter Moms in Texas. And she's a phenomenal advocate, and we met the first time actually at a charter school conference several years ago at this point. And before that, we kind of followed each other on social media and on Twitter and would retweet each other. So we kind of bonded over social media, and then just following what you've been doing in San Antonio. I've become a big fan and very appreciative of the work that you do to support families in your community. Inga, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, kind of your school choice journey, how you even, how did San Antonio Charter Moms come to be?
Right. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. So so my name is Inga Cotton, and San Antonio Charter Moms started out as a project, helping my own kids, and then realizing that there were a lot of families who needed help with the same thing of like trying to sort out what schools their kids should be in. So I have two kids. I have a 12-year-old son named Nicholas, who's on the autism spectrum, and I have a 10-year-old daughter named Annika, who is neurotypical and helps all of us a lot. So for Nicholas being on the autism spectrum, it was hard to find school that was the right fit. So we tried private preschool, we tried a neighborhood public school. I homeschooled him for a year while waiting for a charter school to open. And then he's been at Great Hearts Monte Vista, which is a classical education charter school in San Antonio for 6 years. And it's worked really well for him. And then the younger sister joined him there, and it's worked well for her as well. So, but just like that struggle of like, trying one thing and then wondering like, am I crazy? What else is out there? And just how confusing it is to try to sort out, what all the different options are. So I realized that like, if it was this hard for us, then it's gotta be hard for other families as well. So, and now in San Antonio, we've had a lot of growth of charter schools over the last 10 years. And so that was kind of the formation, why it's called San Antonio Charter Moms. Is there a handful of us who got together and we're like, okay, there's these new schools coming, but people are still asking basic questions like, what's the tuition, or do my kids have to test in, or just it's like, all these basic questions. We're like, okay, how do we communicate about the new schools that are coming? And so I decided I would teach myself WordPress. I looked at what like mom bloggers were doing, right, there's so many great mom bloggers who do crafts or cooking or travel or lifestyle, and sort of applying that as like a fun way to communicate and have a sense of community online. And so that's how the blog formed. But as along the way, like we created the Facebook group. So we're over 6,500 members, and we talk about all kinds of options. So like it says Charter Moms in the name, but like dads are welcome, grandparents are welcome. And people ask about online schools, they ask about private schools, they ask about camps and enrichment programs and special education support. And I mean, so basically, if it's, our mission is to be the trusted source of information and to advocate for quality education in San Antonio. So we're sharing information, and we're also encouraging people like register to vote, right? There's a runoff election next month in Texas, but early voting starts at the end of this month, and the deadline to register to vote is Monday. So if you're in Texas and you're listening to this and you're not registered to vote, go. You've got a couple of days to do it, right? Yeah. So that kind of messaging. So and then it's just evolved, right? So like we have a mobile app that's a school finder. We're about to do a big update on that. We just upgraded our website so that the school finder is on the website as well. Just all these tools. And then over the past few months, we, instead of talking so much about, what's the difference between Basis or Great Hearts or IDEA, like we've been talking more about what is your remote education experience like? And people are more curious about what virtual schools and online schools are like. And so we're trying to help people with the crisis that they're in, right? And then now that it's summer, we're sharing a lot of content about ways to keep learning at home, and so there's, I see great links in the parent support group. I'll share those in my group, or like if we have something on our blog, then we can share that in the parent support group, and it reaches a wider audience. It says like today I had a guest on our page in the morning, and we were talking about how to teach financial responsibility to your kids, and she had all these great ideas about like books and games and like videos and songs, and just like I got all fired up about it. So we can make the best of this time that we're in, because it's very strange to have everything closed and having to stay at home, but we're with our kids, and we can pass on knowledge and life skills to them. And I guess was talking about how we can make what they'll remember about this is maybe not the scary stuff, but maybe like, hey, you took the time to play card games with me. Those are the things they'll take away from it.
And I think if anybody follows Inga, she is very active in her community, and she has her children out exploring and taking classes, and on top of the wonderful education they're getting at Great Hearts, but you guys are busy. And so when you talk about summer, I imagine this is not a summer that you imagined or would normally have for your kids, because so many things aren't happening like they normally do. Although Texas, I don't think you guys, maybe you didn't shut down quite as much as other states did. But I'm sure you've had to make some adjustments to your summer plans.
Yeah, for sure. Things shut down very dramatically, and then in May things started to reopen. But what's concerning me is that we've seen a dramatic rise in the number of cases and hospitalizations this week, because it's kind of that much time since Memorial Day. And so, things may kind of close down a little bit more, and different, right? So, like one thing I'm very passionate about is technology. So like my husband is a computer programmer for his job, and I see so many jobs of the future will involve technology. So we've had our kids in a coding class, and the studio has reopened, but and I know they're being really careful. Like they have all these really good procedures about hand sanitizer and like spacing people out and stuff. But I'm just not ready to have my kids in an enclosed space for that amount of time. And partly because we sort of have our quarantine pod, right? And then we have some older relatives who are in our quarantine pod, and basically I have to be as careful as an 85-year-old because that's who's in our pod. And it breaks my heart because like I love the owners of that studio, but they let us just kind of go on pause for a few months until we can kind of reevaluate what the situation is, and then we're just looking at what virtual resources there are, and then we're doing a lot of it's kind of always been on my wish list to visit a lot of the state parks in Texas. And I know Shay, who was the guest on Tuesday, we've been like trading tips about, she's, because of scouting, like she's been to tons of these parks.
Yes.
And for us,
she's watching right now. Shay's watching right now.
Hi, Shay. Yeah. And we no, because she's been, well, for us, it was always like, it was on the bucket list, but we never made time to go because there was always like something in town, right? Like something at a museum or, a concert that we wanted to go to. But because a lot of that stuff is closed, or we just don't feel as comfortable being indoors, then we're doing all this outdoor stuff. So we've been going to parks that have been on our bucket list for years, and now we're actually getting to go. So I find for myself, for my mood and for my outlook, I have to have things on the calendar that I'm looking forward to. And one of the hardest things about like March and April was just like wiping things off the calendar.
Just seeing event after event. Yeah.
Really, that was hard.
Really difficult. So it has been difficult days. How did COVID-19 school closure, how did that affect Great Hearts and your school community? Like what did the closure look like, and then what did remote learning look like for your school?
Right. So I remember, okay, so my kid's last day of on campus was March 6th. And so then the week after that was spring break citywide. And so I think it's funny because like and when everybody left, especially for like the seniors, like when they left on March 6th, they just thought it was a regular day, and they thought they'd see their friends again in a week after spring break. And so nobody really, nobody really acted like it was special, right? It was sort of like, oh, there's this thing happening out there, but then like things changed so quickly, and like by like the Thursday or Friday of spring break, everything, like the closures were being announced. I think it was coordinated among all the superintendents of like, we're just going to announce this, and then, but they announced like, well, we're closing for a week and then we'll reevaluate. And I think what a lot of schools did, what Great Hearts did, is they took that week to adjust. And like, so basically my kids had like 2 weeks of spring break, kind of like there wasn't I came up with some stuff for them to do, reading and things, but but not anything formal from the school. So kind of 2 weeks spring break, and then the remote education kicked in, and I was really impressed how quickly, like especially like the teachers got stuff together, and they kept presenting new material, which I was really grateful for. It wasn't busy work, and it wasn't just review. It was like, okay, here's a new set of spelling words. Like here's the book we're reading for literature. And I think the subject that my kids made the most progress in during remote education was probably writing, which you would think would be kind of hard to teach remotely, but they would give these prompts, and they would, just, I don't know, like they had a lot of structure to it, right? Of like, okay, well, here's your ideas, and here's your outline, here's your draft. And, they just, there are things that you think would be really hard to do remotely, and these teachers found a way to do it.
I think it's interesting that you say that, just because, my son was a full-time virtual school student, and that was one of the strengths of the curriculum with Connections Academy. Was it was very writing intensive. And so where the old school, where you did a draft and then you did revisions, and so by the time they turned something in, that was probably the fifth time that they worked on that particular piece. And so I thought it was interesting that that's where you saw your kids really get some growth, because maybe they had the time to devote to it that they didn't in the traditional day-to-day classroom setting. So
right.
Yeah. And so did they what is Great Hearts a very tech heavy ed tech kind of school normally?
Normally the only time the Chromebooks come out is when they're doing like assessment testing.
Really?
And like the only technology in the classroom is, well, they have fluorescent lights and they have a dock cam, right? So it's they pride themselves on being kind of low tech. And so I think now, I was a little jealous of my friends who go to BASIS, because BASIS is a fairly tech heavy school, and they have campuses in Asia. And so I think that they saw it coming. And so like BASIS only lost 1 day of class.
Interesting.
They stood everything up by Tuesday after spring break. I was like,
wow,
okay, that's awesome. It's badass. But no, so Great Hearts is low tech, but also I think one of the real strengths of Great Hearts, like what attracted me to it, like why did I choose Great Hearts? Like part of it was I toured a campus in Arizona, and I saw the Humane Letters seminar, especially like for the juniors and seniors, and like how mature the students are, and kind of the big ideas they have, and how they're referring to the text, and they're deferring to each other, and like passing ideas around. The teachers just kind of sit back and let the students lead. And it just, like, I thought, wow, that is like, what a great way to shape minds. And that's a very like in-person thing, right? I mean, but they've now, from my friends who have high schoolers, what they did was so for my son, he was invited to go to Zoom office hours when he had questions. He was kind of shy about that. It was Zoom with a group was hard. One-on-one Zoom he's okay with, but group Zoom is hard for him socially. But like for the high schoolers, when they would do their Humane Letters seminars, they would do it by Zoom. And so like they were able to keep that discussion going, right? And like when the seniors would defend their theses, they would do that over Zoom. So you would think that, like, I mean, Great Hearts being kind of low tech, that it's a heavy lift to adjust to remote learning, but they found ways to make it meaningful.
Yeah, interesting that it doesn't have to. People think that online learning, remote learning, it's just it's very computer centric, and that's the delivery mechanism. but a lot of the good work, the best work that students are doing is happening offline, you know, with their nose in a book or writing or performing an experiment or, you know, whatever, just like they would do in any other school setting. But it doesn't mean you're sitting in a Zoom session for 5 or 6 hours. Nobody wants that for kids. Nobody wants that as an adult. So, I think that's interesting how they, you know, they took some time, got their bearings, and then they, you know, let you guys go. So they had Zoom office hours. They got packets, I'm imagining, at some point with work.
Right. So that was, I think, one of the sort of challenges. I think that was maybe harder for grade arts, because like the teachers didn't have a system that they were used to, and so it kind of so they wound up doing about 10 weeks of remote education between after spring break until the official end of the school year. And I would say for the first 5 to 6 weeks, the instructions would change a little bit every week. And so, but then by week 6, I was like, okay, guys, you got it, we got it. Okay, good. I know how to turn this in. Okay. So, but it was like, first it was like you pick up the packet from school and then you drop it off the next Monday. And then it was like, okay, now like you log into Google Classroom and you can download this and print this part, don't print that part. You know, scan this part, you can scan it this way and it was like, anyway, but like eventually we got a handle on it. And like, so, and like for my son, a lot of it was like, we would print out a packet, we'd stick it in a binder. And actually my kids learned some really good organizational skills, because they'd each get a binder and we'd kind of sort it by day or by subject. And they were responsible for, like, the teacher would give them a to-do list of, you know, this is what you get done today. And then like I would check my daughter's work at the end of the day. My son, like his favorite person is my sister. They're super close. They're just
nice.
So like, so she would like call him and like FaceTime him and check his work that way. And like he'd put it in Google Drive and she could check his math and stuff like that, and his Latin. And he doesn't want me to check his work, only his aunt.
Whatever works. And that's something that we talk about as full-time online families, is when you educate a student at home, you're really educating a family, and it's a lifestyle, it's a change. You know, it really takes all hands on deck. So I love that, that, you know, you pull in all your resources that you need to get your kid the education that they deserve. So I love that.
What you said about a lifestyle, that makes a lot of sense. So like my kids are, okay, so when I do my chats, it's 9 a.m. Central on the Sanitary Turner Moms page, and that became like recess, because my kids do. I'd be like, get out of the house. They didn't want to try to be quiet.
Mom's gotta work. Mom's gotta work. So talk about that. How did you juggle? Was your husband working from home? Did he become a remote worker through this crisis? So how, as a family, how did you juggle remote learning, remote working? How did that all work?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So part of it is, it's like finding that right balance of like, you know, when can they be autonomous? When do they need support, someone to check in with them? And how do they, I think it helped that, I think because my kids they're old enough, they're right 10 and 12. I think I have deep empathy for the families with young children, where like they, like one of our team members, Laura, she has, her oldest is the same as my youngest. So for her younger kids, she really had to sit with them and go over each problem. And thankfully, I didn't really need to do that. It was more like, you know, you run with it and then I'll come and check your work. Or like spelling tests, like you just have to.
You had to play teacher then, yeah.
Right. You just have to do that. Or like, like you mentioned science experiments, right? So my daughter had to set up, like she had to dissolve the baking soda, and like we had these like crystals growing in the kitchen for a while. So there was some setup with that. But I think having, I remember like the first weekend, I felt like I was kicking myself, because I felt like I was spending so much time. I don't have a copy of it handy, but like we made this like Excel. I mean, people make, I mean, it's kind of OCD, but I use a Google sheet to make like hour by hour, you know, what you're supposed to do. And I printed it out, and then like the kids could see it and be like, oh, at this hour, I'm supposed to be doing this. You know, it had like time blocked out, and that way, like, they had something to hold on to, and I had something to hold on to. So we had routines. Because my son, like autism, he likes routine. He likes to know what happened, and it took a while to adjust from the school routine to the home routine. I would say, like, again, by week 6, it's like the school had the instructions smoothed out, but also I felt like that was enough time to build habits to where my kids kind of knew what to expect. They didn't feel lost or out of place. Like, yeah, it's weird how it's almost not weird to be home all the time. Because, like, I used to be hardly ever at home. I used to be, like, I would, like, leave my house at the crack of dawn, and we'd be, just out and about. And, like, the challenge was to get everything in my car that I was going to need that day, right? Like, where's the tennis racket? Where's the the binders for the board meeting, right? Right. But now, yeah, I'm totally spoiled. I don't know, when I have to go back out in the world, I'm going to be driving home all the time because I forgot something.
It's going to be a shock to the system. Just a few comments. So Shay is watching, our fellow advocate from Texas.
Still in Texas? Yeah.
Yes, and she says, yes, there is always a learning curve for both the students and the teachers when you switch to online. And she also said that charter schools, she heard that a lot of them did they did a great job during the transition. And then, you were talking about organizing and the kids kind of figuring out, how to be organized and time management. And Lori Cooney, who's one of our longtime online parent advocates, she says organizational skills and time management are some of the benefits of online learning.
I saw a lot of growth in that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, that's a skill. That's something that students have to learn. And I think that's what sets students who do online or some form of distance learning, they learn that. And by the time they graduate and go off to college, they're really self-sufficient, self-motivated. They know what they have to get done, and they know the consequences if they don't get it done. And that sets them up, I think, differently than some students that are in the traditional setting and really haven't been able to exercise those muscles as much as their online counterparts. And I know for my college student, it set him apart from some of his peers. He used to kind of get aggravated because his freshman year, he'd be like, these kids don't have their work done and they don't know what they're doing. And
they didn't read the book. Yeah.
No, he had no patience. He's like, what's wrong with you people? And I'm like, they didn't have the same experience and they're getting their first taste of freedom. And so they got to figure it out. But yeah, those were interesting conversations. But I'm glad to hear that, the school, they got their bearings, they figured it out. You had that adjustment period and those growing pains as a family to figure it all out, which is totally normal. As full-time online, we choose it. So we go into it knowing kind of what's coming at us. But there's still an adjustment when you switch from traditional mode of learning to online learning. There's a learning curve there. And I always tell people, you got to give yourself a couple months to kind of figure out. And, you have 2 kids, 2 unique kids. So what works for one probably doesn't work for the other. And so you got to give yourself permission to make mistakes and course correct and, just figure it out. Just figure it out. And it's okay. And if you're not stressed, I'm actually more worried because, yeah, the parents would say, oh, it was so easy. And, and I'm like, what? Yeah, then you're not doing something wrong. Right. Because it's a lot of work and it's a big investment of time. And most parents, you really are, when you start any kind of new education adventure, you're second guessing yourself and asking yourself, am I crazy? Why are we doing this? And so I'm glad to hear that that's been your experience, because I think it's totally normal. And I think parents listening will either agree or it will resonate with them. Talk a little bit about, so this whole, Inga's on here because she's wonderful and she's a great advocate, but she wrote a piece that was in response to another piece in her hometown paper, I guess. And it caught my eye because it was about online learning, and if it's about online, I'm reading it. And I was just so grateful to have your perspective, because Texas has been, I don't know, the thorn in my side as an online advocate for many, many years. Just a little background for our viewers. Texas does have full-time online schools. They're very limited. And then there's a bunch of crazy enrollment barriers there in the state. And the organization that I was president of for several years, the National Coalition for Public School Options, we have a chapter in Texas, and Shay Mackin is our parent leader there. And Shay and I have spent a lot of time over the years in Austin at the State House trying to get those barriers lifted, and the work continues. And we've had some success. We've had enrollment barriers for military families lifted, which was really important. And so, but any extra voices are appreciated and wonderful. And so Inga wrote this great piece. I have it right here. And tell me how it came about and why you felt the need, like, I need to write something. I need to address this. What happened?
Yeah. Okay, so I have props. So this was the piece I was responding to, and so it came out on I guess around the 23rd of May or so, and it really bothered me because I felt like it was setting up this like straw man argument or this conspiracy, right? So the idea is that there's this conspiracy in Texas that these shadowy forces are going to try to make all students go to virtual school all the time, and that's ridiculous, right? Nobody's arguing for that. Like that's, and then the author, she's talking about her own experience and how unsatisfactory it was for them to do online learning, and I feel bad for them that they had a bad experience with it. To some extent, it's that bricks and mortar schools are having to make a really rapid shift to virtual learning. And, the teachers are working really hard. They're trying their best. They don't have the training for it. They haven't been, they don't have the expertise. And which in some ways that makes me wonder, it's like, well, why don't we just take these barriers away and let that experienced virtual schools help more students, right? They know what they're doing. So,
right.
And we've had some discussion in the Charter Moms group about families saying, well, look, I'd rather keep doing virtual learning, but I'm not sure that the school that my kids were at is really up to the task to do virtual learning. And so that's why, it's like, well, maybe you should go to the experts. So sorry, that's a little tangent, but this piece was saying that, it really bugged me because it just seems so obvious to me that virtual schools have to be part of the set of options that are available to families. And that was true before coronavirus. It will be true after coronavirus, but it's especially important now and there should not be a rush to bring students back on campus. I think every family needs to make their own decision about, how safe they feel about having their students on campus, about, maybe it's better to have, young learners on campus. Maybe it's better to have the high school kids on campus. I don't know. There's lots of different factors. And, some kids need therapies online, but then here in San Antonio, there's a firm that contracts with a lot of charter schools, and they're actually doing tele-evaluations of special needs students. So, there's a lot of potential for innovation out there. So yeah, what bothered me so much about this was this sort of fake argument that, these shadowy forces are trying to make all students do virtual school all the time, which is ridiculous.
No, even, that's been at the heart of my advocacy for 16 years now. Never have I ever said that, let's eliminate all public schools and everybody should be online. And Never, ever would I ever suggest that. But like you said, we know it's a critical option for families, and the fact that it's not going anywhere. Um, and I think after this, we'll see like you mentioned, there's families in your group that are saying, you know, we might want to continue this. But yeah, I don't know where this person, these shadowy figures, I haven't met them yet. I'm still waiting to meet these shadowy figures that, you know, want to dismantle public education and
I
turn
know,
it
it's like,
on.
where does that come from? Yeah, I
I
don't know.
don't know.
I mean,
I don't know. I'm still waiting to meet them. And if anybody was going to know them, it would probably be me. But anyway, yeah,
right.
yeah.
I mean, my kids are public school students, right? They go to a public charter school. So
Exactly.
there you go,
Exactly.
right?
I'm
And
the
virtual
proud
school.
parent of 2 public school grads. So yeah, I haven't privatized it yet. And I haven't turned everybody into online families. So I don't know. I'm just not doing it right, I guess.
I don't know, but I felt a really strong need to tell like our story. The fact, I mean, so unfortunately that the other writer had a negative experience, but I would say overall we've had a positive experience, you know, as we've been talking about remote learning. And so in particular for my son. So now my daughter is you know, she misses her friends a lot, but you know, we set up Zoom calls and she's figured out how to, they play hangman over Zoom. Who knew, right? I mean, they've come up with all kinds of games that,
They're digital
Battleship.
natives. They're digital
Yeah,
natives. They figure it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
Battleship is a really good one for Zoom. So there you go.
Nice. Nice.
And yeah, so yeah, and she would dial in pretty often for like the 1 p.m. like when her class would get together. But for my son, I noticed that he was less anxious. He was able to concentrate better, and the fact that could be in his home, like in his PJs, like well, he'd have to put on a uniform shirt for the calls, but
Well, we all dress just from the waist up now, so.
exactly, yes. You know, like I mean, he was able, like especially like in writing and in literature and in history, like subjects that typically were harder for him to concentrate on at school. He made a lot of progress on those subjects, and he has told me very specifically, like if he can, he would like to continue learning from home in the
Wow.
future, like indefinitely. Now you know, I have to weigh the pros and cons because, you know, as a child with autism, like, I mean, he will become an adult with autism, and I want him to have a life full of choices. And that involves having social skills and be able to read body language and navigate in a crowd. And, you know, so, I mean, that was a big reason why we've always pushed for as much inclusion as possible, was so that he could learn those skills. And he made a lot of progress. But when I see how much academic progress he's able to make while working from home, I think, wow, you know. And like with older kids, you need to, the older they get, the more you need to listen when they speak up about what they want, you know, because they have a bigger and bigger stake in it, and you want them to be motivated and have buy-in with what you're doing. So we're still waiting to hear. I mean, Great Heart said on June 26th they would make some kind of announcement about, you know, what our options are for the fall. I think everyone's kind of waiting for the Texas Education Agency to announce what the funding formula.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, well, so we must be a little bit ahead of you. Colorado, we've got those numbers, and it's looking about a 5% cut on per pupil. But our governor is really pushing for full-time, like get these kids back in the classroom. Districts are being a little more strategic, I think, and you know, there's a lot of talk of, you know, if you want your kid back or they need to be back, they'll be full-time. Then we may have a group that's going to go hybrid, and then if you want to do full-time online, we're going to figure out how to do that. But then we also had 2 districts come out just this week and say, our plans are to open up. We're going to open up. But we also had a call, I was on a call this morning with the state epidemiologist, and they're talking about another peak in August, bigger than the peak we had in April, which is scary. And terrible timing, because that's when school starts back up. So I don't know, you know, I don't know, but yeah, you guys are still waiting kind of to see what the plan is.
The schools want to know if they will get paid for the students who work remote. And
Yeah.
right now that's not clear. So I can understand school not wanting to say, oh, sure, you can work from home.
Yeah.
You know, they got to get paid for the work that the teachers are doing.
Well, and that's, parents a lot of times don't understand the policies that go along and the funding. And okay, if your state is doing, average daily attendance for funding, what's that going to look like if on October 1st, half of your kids are working at home and half are in class? So we're still waiting for CDE to tell us what attendance count date is going to look like. And I'm thinking there's probably going to have to be some policy discussions to get that figured out, but there's so much unknown. There's so much unknown. So I think that gets back to, you writing this piece and saying online is important and we've got to have it because, it was important before COVID. It's going to be important going forward, no matter what this educational landscape is going to look like. I'm just so grateful that you wrote this piece, because I think, for online parents, they think, well, of course you're going to say it's great, and but to get an outside perspective, and like you said, each kid is different and needs something different, and why would we not provide them the opportunities to learn in the setting that fits them best? So, I mean, but again, then what, so we just got to keep those opportunities open for families.
We see there's a lot of questions coming up. Again, like you said, like in Texas, there's just so much we don't know yet, but I mean, people are sharing whatever they can find, right? So like, hey, we got an email from our kid's school about this is what fall might look like, and then they'll share that in the group, right? So like, or like Austin ISD has come out with some information before any of the districts in San Antonio. So we're kind of pulling it apart, like what would the class sizes be and stuff. So, and what I'm expecting, so normally in the discussion group, things are really busy in May as people talk about waiting lists and, like, oh, we turned down this school to accept this offer and stuff. And then things kind of go quiet in the summer and people kind of unplug from school and have a summer. But it's totally different this year, right? In May, everyone was focused on remote education. In the summer now, they're talking about what activities they can do, right? What's open, what's closed. And then we're starting to see some talk about back to school. We just don't know that much. But what I'm expecting is that in August, maybe July, but definitely by August, there'll be a flurry of, people saying, okay, now that I know what my school is offering, I'm actually looking for an alternative because, right, what if it's a school that says your child has to come on campus, but, they're a family like mine where we have, family members who are high risk. So, it's a different calculation for us. So, I'm expecting, so which comes back to like our mission, San Antonio Charter Moms, is to just get that information out and try to, just share as much as we can. So I know we're going to be like, as schools make their announcements, we're going to be like really, really busy, updating the blog and
I'm a little worried about Texas because you have such limited full-time virtual schools, and you have these enrollment barriers. And, I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We have multiple military installations, and every year families leave Colorado who have experienced a lot of robust choice in the online world and in the charter world. And then they get to Texas, and I have to tell them, you're not going to be able to enroll your kid. Thankfully, we've overcome that military barrier, but there's still limited seats. There's still, there's only so many seats available to these online students. And I talked with a friend, they're actually thinking about going to San Antonio. And normally I would tell her, start doing your research and, well, I told her, I'm like, if you think you're moving to Texas, you need to like make it happen real quick, because we don't know what the fall is going to look like and what capacity is going to be and what kind of waiting list. We know in North Carolina has like 400 and some slots available. In one school, they had 1,000 applications. Wow. And we know that because of this crisis, people are going to be seeking out online education because they have concerns like your family are, even though we know kids aren't necessarily as susceptible, they can be vectors and they can take it home to a vulnerable family member. And so that's really scary for families. And so, if you're in Texas, or if you're thinking about moving to Texas and you want to pursue online education, I really encourage families to start doing their research now, contacting the schools. Don't wait until the end of July or the first part of August, because it may be too late. And that would be horrible for a family to not get the school that they need for their kids. Let's see, what is Shay saying? It says, and if you come into Texas and are not military, online is not an option. There's a requirement in Texas that you have to do 1 year in a public school prior to enrolling in online. And that's an enrollment barrier that other states took care of a decade ago. So, we're going to keep working on that advocacy piece and trying to get those policy fixes in place, but parents really have to be proactive. What are you hearing about schools beefing up their remote learning plans? If they know, they're going to need some either hybrid approach or online, they know. What about access, equity issues? Professional development. What conversations are you hearing them? Are they getting serious about it and trying to improve remote learning coming for the fall?
The ones that I've talked to, it seems like they take it very seriously, like with the professional development. So I would say, no, like I said, Basis they stood theirs up very quickly because they had I think they run almost everything on Microsoft, and so they use Microsoft Teams instead of Zoom. But they, and I think that they got it set up very quickly. But I think that over the summer they're working on refinements about smoothing things out. It seems like for Great Hearts, it took them a few weeks to get a handle on good ways to deliver materials to students, good ways to collect information from students, and ways to simplify it so the grading was doable for the teachers. I think early on they were just collecting so much information that it was overwhelming for the teachers to grade. But it seems like that they've kind of gotten a handle on some of that stuff. But we just need to see, like, do they change what technologies they use? But I know they're working on it, because I mean, like you said, if epidemiologists are predicting future spikes, right? Like there may be a point where the school has to shut down again, right? So even if they reopen campuses, if there's a crisis in a particular community, or if there's a lot of cases on a particular campus, they may have to close the school temporarily. And actually, this is a slight tangent, but this is one of my concerns. My son, being on the autism spectrum, he really likes routines, right? I talked about how we transitioned from the school routine to our home routine. It took a few weeks for him to get comfortable again. If he went back on campus and then the school had to close because of a stay-at-home order and then reopen again later, that would be really disruptive for him. Like I would rather keep him home until we get some kind of all clear to where it's like, okay, now you're gonna go back on campus until you graduate.
I think that's a genuine concern for parents, is the back and forth. And I've even heard of some schools talking about seeing if they can get some kind of waiver to go fully online. That's not their, how they were created or their original model, but they're worried about, financially and logistically, how many times can they close down in a year and restart, and what that'll mean for teachers and for students and for families. It's a real concern.
Like we're seeing revised school calendars come out for some of the districts. So like one kind of weird thing about San Antonio is that we have like 17 different districts in the county, which is different than other major cities in Texas. But some of the districts have already put out their calendars, and like they might start a few weeks earlier. They might extend the school year into June a lot further, and then it's almost like they're building in. They're expecting that they're going to have some kind of closure during the school year, but they want to still have enough instructional days to make it count.
Yeah,
so that's a change. And
so
you mentioned
much
about equity. That so I think San Antonio ISD in particular has shown leadership of like trying to get so like they had like a 3-year program to have one-to-one technology, and they accelerated that to like 3 months. So
wow.
they got their hands on a lot of devices and a lot of hotspots. You know, and then I think that like the city, you know, people are asking what can the city of San Antonio do. So like actually my neighbor works at the fire department. He said that they're setting up kind of neighborhood Wi-Fi in some of the low-income neighborhoods, so that it's like wherever you are, you know, you're covered, but it's limited to like the highest need parts of town. And I think that's great, and I wish we had done it years ago, because you know those are kids who've been having trouble getting help on their homework for
You
years.
hit on that in your piece. You talk about the digital divide and the fact that, you know, my family and your family, we're blessed. We live where we have good broadband, and you know, a parent can be home to support their student. We have the technology. We don't have that digital divide in our everyday lives, and it's a real issue. And like you said, it was already there before COVID. Now it's really been exacerbated. And I loved that you talked about internet as a basic utility, as a universal basic need at this point. And I think that's the heavier lift. But I think, you know, this is the time where the FCC needs to stand up. There's E-rate out there, and there's some things that could be done right now today to, you know, we could loosen some of the restrictions on that, and that would benefit kids in Austin, in urban areas, but then also in rural parts of Texas that have limited internet capabilities. But I love that you hit on that, because it's really important. And, you know, I'm very sensitive to it, that not every family is, you know, in the same position that we are. And so we've really got to rally the troops to fill this need for these families, because we're leaving them behind. And that's not equitable. And I know that's important to you as well.
I talk about in the piece, I talk about it as like survivor's guilt, right? That like in some way, like I'm happy that my kids were thriving. I mean, you know, there've been sad times too, you know, that like we love the San Antonio Zoo, and it's one of our favorite places to go walking. But they closed for a couple months, and then they reopened as a drive-through. And so we tried it just as like, okay, this is just too unique. Like we have to do this at least once. And then so we did the drive-through, and like I thought it was really interesting. We got home, and then my daughter just seemed kind of out of sorts, right? And she's a really sunny person usually, so I was trying to figure out like, what's going on. And as I got her talking, it was like she was glad we went, but it was just so weird to be stuck in the car and not be able to walk and see the animals, and like just like the weirdness of it. It just got her that day, you know. So there, you know, I'm sure everybody's had their moments of like, you know, like this is just so weird. So you know, I mean, we've had our moments, but overall we've had, you know, we've managed well. And but that's when I get survivor's guilt, because I think about the families that are on the wrong side of the digital divide. They don't have access to electronics. They don't have internet. They don't have like a desk that they can sit at. They don't have enough pencils, you know, to get the work done. And so it's like, what do I do about that? Well, I try to help, right? And that's where being an advocate, you know, that's where like we can speak up, we can tell we can inform other people and talk about E-rate and say, look, there are things that FCC can do. We just need to talk to them about it. There are things that the city of San Antonio can do. We just need to talk about it and speak up as parents. We need to raise enough voices to make change happen.
Yeah, it's so important. And I hope, my hope is that, because I love Texas. I mean, I really love Texas. I love the people, I love the culture. And, but this one issue drives me crazy as an advocate. And my hope is that through this crisis, that it'll actually be a catalyst for change. And, we saw basically overnight, the whole world went digital. Socially, academically, professionally, and we've got some work to do, but it's all things that can be done. And so I'm really optimistic that we're going to see change in Texas. And I think your voice and your families are so important. And I'm just grateful for all the work that you do as an advocate. You fill a really important need there in San Antonio and across Texas. I know you're everywhere. You're busy and supporting so many great causes. But if we can help your families, please let us know. We want to be a resource, and that's why we started this whole page. Is we've been there, we've been in the trenches, we understand technology issues and how to motivate students in an online setting and how to support our fellow parents, because it's hard work. And so, we want to continue to be a resource for folks, especially as they start investigating their options and trying to figure out, what we're going to do in the fall. So, your families, if we can be there and be of assistance, we would love to do that. Do you guys have any special things that you're working on with San Antonio Charter Moms? I know you were talking about summer plans and anything special that we should be on the lookout for?
Oh yeah, so we have a page. So if you go to sachartermoms.com/summer-learning, and there's a big orange box on the homepage too. But if you click on that, so we call it Charter a Summer of Learning, keeping a charter theme.
I like it.
For each day there is, so I think okay, so one thing that I felt like I love, like, the ideas that are flying around about, like, you can do this with your kids, you can do this with your kids, but sometimes it feels overwhelming.
It's
and
really
at
overwhelming.
other times it feels like it's like I'm stuck at home, like what can I do, like there's and so what we try to do is like our team has brainstormed and we've curated and we found like guest writers to come up with like a different idea to inspire parents every day. So we've had let's see, last week we had listening to jazz with your kids. We've had film studies, right? So there's my friend who curates the like a classic movie series every summer, but then they're not sure if they're gonna be able to show the movies, but anyway, but like like classic movies that kids will love to watch with you. And so just a different for the solstice it's going to be cooking in a solar oven, right? I bet Shay has done that with her campers.
Fun.
So
I like it.
So and then we try to tailor it so that for each activity, like if you have young kids, it's like, here's how to do it with young kids. If you have teenagers who are rolling your eyes at you, this is how you make it more challenging for them, or and then it's the stuff that's designed to be like low cost. You can do it while social distancing. It's not hard to get the materials, like you just need like the inspiration, and then that way like you don't feel overwhelmed, but you just get that spark of like, I'm gonna learn something new. And then when you step back, so like my kids have been doing typing for a few weeks, and they're getting pretty good at it. And that's something that, like I said, we really care about technology and coding, and like I feel like typing is a really fundamental skill, and actually their school doesn't teach it. It's just it's kind of a low-tech school, and it's something they kind of expect parents to take care of on their own. Well, we're taking care of it, and it makes me feel good that we're using this time in a way that will benefit them for the rest of their lives. And I want other families to have that feeling too, of like, that yes, there are so many things, so many doors that are shut to us right now, right? Like I can't go to my family reunion this summer. I can't.
Ours was canceled too. Yeah.
Sucks, man. I love my cousins.
Yeah.
I miss them. And there's lots of babies too. My cousin's been having babies, and I want to hug the
Oh,
babies. And so I just get pictures, but they're very cute. So
yeah.
but no, so but I try to not dwell on the things I can't do, but I try to like, think about like the memories that we're making together, like when my daughter does cooking and she brings out the chocolate cookies and we're all excited, like just how proud she is. And she said that she likes the feeling of trying new recipe because she feels competent and she feels
Nice.
good at something and like she's learning something new. And that, you can have that feeling even while you're cooped up at home. You just need some inspiration and some guidance. I think like the parent support group, provides that. There's lots of ideas and that's what we're trying to provide is, every day a different inspiration. And like we'll have the guest authors come on and do a chat and, explain like, and they share their passion about, and it's infectious. Like when you talk to somebody who really loves their subject and, so even if you're feeling kind of blue or, kind of lonely, you miss your usual activities, if you tune into these videos, I think it'll get families energized and what they can do together.
Well, I think it's wonderful that you're doing that. And we'll add the link to that to our summer learning opportunities file for our families. Because really, yeah, we have a choice. We have a choice on how we respond to all of this. And let's look at it as a summer of opportunity. So it may not be our usual choices or activities, but there's a lot of opportunity out there to learn and have fun in a different way. And we're grateful for you providing another outlet for us to keep our kids busy and their minds learning, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for taking time with us today. And thank you again for writing this wonderful piece on online learning.
Sure, that's again.
We're gonna, Lori Cooney asked, she wants to read it. So we'll share it again in this thread so people can go back and read it because it really was wonderful to tell the other side of the experience. Remote learning, it had a bumpy start, but for a lot of families, they did find benefits to it. And we're grateful for you sharing your experience with it. So that's all for the Parent Exchange this week. Thank you to our guest, Inga Cotton, and all the wonderful San Antonio charter moms out there that are doing such great work. We appreciate you. And we will be back next week with another installment of the Parent Exchange. Thank you all and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Tilly. Bye.
Thank you.